Hi, everyone. This is Lacey Estelle with An ADD Woman podcast. I'm so excited for the guest that I have on for you today, Dr. Rebecca Troy. She is awesome. She's doing some amazing things when it comes to the brain, and you know how obsessed I am with the brain. Welcome to An ADD Woman podcast. I'm your host, Lacey Estelle, writer of all things about ADHD parenting and being an ADHD mother on Mothering the Storm with Lacey Estelle at laceyestelle.com. Here on an ADD Woman podcast, we're going to switch it up and talk about all things to do with ADHD as an adult woman and how we deal with it. Now, you might be thinking, ADHD, women don't really have that. Actually, we do. We've all just been doing such a great job for years of masking it. So let's dive in. So Dr. Rebecca Troy is the founder and director of Retrain the Dyslexic Brain. She has a doctorate in education, is nationally board certified in early and middle literacy, and has over 15 years experience working with children and teens to retrain how the brain hears and responds to language. I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for being on, Dr. Troy. So can you tell us more? I know that me and you touched on, we came in contact because I actually came across your ad on Facebook for your program. And I thought, wow, that sounds amazing. So Dr. Troy's program is called Retrain the Dyslexic Brain. And if you're a parent like me who's ever been sitting, in a parent-teacher conference or an IEP meeting, and the school psychologist says to you, oh, well, I do think your child's dyslexic, it can feel so defeating. So to come across something that says retrain the dyslexic brain, and I just got to say, I've been to your website, and the testimonials that are on there are amazing. Just like absolutely blown away. The things that I know, and I can see, where, different mothers have put on there that, this is 4 weeks apart for as far as like their spelling for their child. And it just floors me. So I want to talk about, what got you into this originally. I know we talked in the past about it, but could you tell my audience more about how you got started and what made you so interested in specifically working with dyslexic kids?
Absolutely. So I was a high school English teacher, and I think the assumption was that once kids reached the high school, that they would know how to read and spell. And so I was absolutely floored, as you said, when a lot of students would come into the classroom, and not only did they not have the ability to do that, but my training as an educator was really not on par with their needs. And so it was frustrating to go, month after month and trying all of the tools that I had at that time to really support those students. And I just didn't have the capacity. And so it was like, okay, well, I know that I'm going to be doing a master's at some point anyways. I guess I'm going to speed up that process. I'm going to go for a master's in literacy education, getting reading specialist certification. At that time, I happened to be at a university with a woman who was really, really integral to some of the first topographic brain maps of kids with dyslexia. And so, how sometimes you just end up in the right place at the right time. This woman was incredibly inspirational to me because, she showed in terms of a brain map, like, look at this is before and this is after. Look at what can happen to the brain of a child with dyslexia when you do certain neurological exercises. And so from that moment on, I have been absolutely fascinated with the brain, with neurology, with dyslexia. It's been a real gift for me to just support and empower a family, because I know I have 2 little kids myself. And when anything goes wrong with your baby, it doesn't matter if it's a cold or anything else, like you just have this desperation almost, like, how can I fix this? What do I need to do? How can I make this better? And when you feel like your options are really limited, oh gosh, that's a sleepless night right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. For sure. I would say when I found for my middle son, when they started talking to me about, dyslexia or dyscalculia, it just feels like a shut door. I know parents feel like well, now my child is they're just going to have this for the rest of their life. And like, what are they going to do if they can never figure out how to read? I know we talked too previously where I was asking you questions about what does your program look like? And for me, so my son that they think also has dyslexia is also undergoing visual processing therapy. And you had said that there is some major differences in your program and something along those lines. And can you kind of talk about, the different parts of the brain? Because I nerd out on that kind of stuff. I don't know about my audience. Hopefully they do, because I talk about it a lot. But the different parts of the brain that really your program, accentuates and works with to try to create those neural pathways, and how those are also different from like a visual processing disorder.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the key attributes of a person with dyslexia is what their neural profile looks like during a language task. So if you're looking at the brain of a person with dyslexia during any other task, like it looks the same. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing that's missing. It's just that when you ask the person to do something related to language, there are literally areas of the brain that don't light up. And so one of those is in the back of the brain that kind of is central to where you process your vision. And the other one is kind of over your ear where you process kind of what you hear. And so there are some crossovers. It's not uncommon to see kids with dyslexia that also have visual processing issues or need vision therapy, or to have auditory processing, or to have ADHD. I mean, it's very, very common to have a lot of those co-occurring things because they are sort of interrelated in the brain. But what we do is through these neural exercises, we help you to kind of stimulate the areas of the brain that are, in a sense, missing, to create new neural connections to those areas so that you can actually read and spell.
That's so amazing. It's so cool. I know I always talk on the podcast, and I try to reiterate to people, and I don't know if my audience really always understands what I mean when I say the brain is malleable. We can teach it, we can do things, we can change it. And, I find that it's so frustrating for so many parents, because a lot of times it's not uncommon for me to find that when they are met with a child who struggles to learn, struggles to focus, struggles to sit still, struggles to read, they also were having all those same issues, and they never really actually were able to overcome them. A lot of times they may have found workarounds, or they found a career that, as long as they could learn this one specific skill, they were fine. But a lot of times because of that, they haven't done the hard work themselves to change their own brain. And now they're stuck with the assignment of, oh my gosh, I have to help my child grow their brain and change it so that they don't have to, just find a career and hope that they can stick with it for the rest of their lives, kind of thing. So how does your program come alongside parents? I know that is definitely, when I go to your website, that's definitely what I feel like. And I love that, because that's the one thing about being a parent of a child who learns differently is it can feel very isolating. It can feel very overwhelming. Like, I have to do this all on my own. This is just so much work. So how do you guys kind of mentor alongside parents and encourage them to continue on through this program, even though there are probably days where kids are like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do the homework. I don't want to do it.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, to your point, there are some kits that you can do at home. Like, here, take this home, try it out, do this with your child. But to your point, again, like, if you don't know yourself what to do, or if you feel like you struggled to do those same tasks, it is really overwhelming and daunting to know, like, okay, here's this kid. Am I doing it right? What does that look like? So one of the things that's unique about what we do is that we coach alongside our clients. And so they see us as much as twice a week if they'd like, but they've got access to, like, here's exactly what to do in a video format, so that they've got, here's the step-by-step process. But we coach alongside them. We have a community that's really celebrating their wins. Like, when a child comes home with, like, oh my goodness, this is the essay that I just wrote. Like, I really wrote an essay. I've never written an essay before, let alone spelled it correctly. That's a huge deal, not only for the child, but for the parent. And so what's amazing is that, they're able to post that into the community, and there's everybody in the group that is just as tearful as that mama, because that's a big deal. And so we do really believe in supporting the community, supporting the family, so that throughout this process, as they're changing neurologically, they're also receiving love and support.
That's awesome. Now, you did talk too that sometimes if parents want to do the program alongside their children, they can, but you don't have an adult specific program, but you have seen some parents try to apply some of the stuff.
Yes. And so neurologically, the same deficits would exist whether you are 5 years old or you are 65 years old. It's the same profile. It's possible that the older that you get, the more workarounds that your brain might have already tried to create. And so what we know is that before the age of 25, there's a lot more plasticity. There's a lot more that can be done in a passive and active way. Once you're beyond 25, you can still change the brain, but it just needs to be more active. You have to be more intentional about what you're doing. The exercises have to be really focused, but it is still possible. So yeah, we do have, because dyslexia runs in families, a few families that not only does their child have dyslexia, but so does the parent. And so the priority has often been like, okay, I'm going to take care of my child first. But as long as I already have this, like, why don't I do this for myself too? So that's in some cases required a spouse to get on board and be involved in providing that training for their spouse.
That's so awesome. So on your website, it also says that the neural work that has to be done per day, it's only like 10 to 15 minutes. Is that about right? Wow.
That's right.
It's amazing. And so then the first portion of the program is 12 weeks long. So it's about 4 months roughly. Is your program an ongoing enrollment program?
Yes. So basically what happens is, families are desperate to get started because they have been, as you said, so frustrated with what's happening at school or the lack of support. And so between the time that we first talk and when the family is getting going with the program can sometimes be 48 hours.
Wow. That's awesome. So my next question is, and I feel like probably most parents are probably like waiting for me to ask this question. How can we know? Like, how do we know if it's dyslexia or if it's, because my children, all of them are neurodivergent. My oldest doesn't seem to struggle so much with the reading activity. He struggles with the comprehension portion. But then it's my second son that definitely struggles, and his reading issues definitely look just like dyslexia. So how do we know, without, or maybe that's required if we have to get a formal diagnosis, how do we know that it's dyslexia or it's something else?
Great question. So I think there are several key markers that would be present in a typical case. And so one of those would be, late to start talking. Another would be late to know the relationship between letters and sounds. It can also be that, it's little words like the, is, when you're trying to read those in a sentence, it's almost like amnesia. So we've literally just looked at this word, the sentence before, now we're down another line, and it's like, I've never seen this before. Mm-hmm. And so that can start to show up. Another big one would be missing letters or adding letters in spelling. So it's like, okay, if the word was operation and we've got a J or we've got a Q or things that you're like, wow, where is this coming from? Mm-hmm. Or we're missing an entire syllable. Those are all red flags to a parent to say, it really sounds like we're not hearing the language properly. And as you're reading, that same thing can happen. You get to a longer word, you might start the first couple of letters and get those accurately. And then everything else is typically a guess, again, with sounds that you're like, oh, I'm not really sure how you got that. And so there are screeners. We do offer screeners to clients if they're unsure, because it is sometimes nice to know that I'm going into a treatment and I know for sure that this is what I have. That being said, you don't have to have a formal diagnosis. Like, if you notice my kid has got these issues and I can pretty regularly see that we are missing sounds, even things like multi-step directions, and I just cannot hear those beyond the first one, can be red flags, but you can treat that right away without having to go through the formal diagnosis, going to see the neuropsychologist, all of those things. You can just be a tenacious parent and say, I want a different result, and I'm going to get that regardless of whether or not I have a diagnosis.
That is awesome. We talked previously, and I'm hoping you can kind of walk me through it again. So can you tell me more too about what exactly is happening in the brain? Because when a child has dyslexia, so for instance, I like, as you're saying this, things are kind of popping out in my head. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. My mom just reminded me the other day that my middle son, we had his hearing tested for like almost every year until he was in like first grade, because a lot of times his teachers would say, are you sure that he's hearing well? Because he would miss directions, or sometimes he just like wouldn't hear what was going on. And I remembered thinking, well, sometimes I kind of have that. And I know that ADHD and auditory processing can kind of go hand in hand. But you talked to me before about like where the dyslexia disconnect is coming from. And so can you talk more about that too, so that parents or anybody else who's interested can really understand that, you're not stupid, because that's the one thing I really hate about anything, labeling a child with any sort of learning disability, or even labeling an adult with it. A lot of times they sit in that label and they will create their identity around it. And at the same time, if that label to them is very negative, then they're thinking to themselves, well, I just can't do that. Or, it literally will take the wind out of their sails. And so rather, let's talk about it as like, we know that the brain is an organ. We know that it can change and it can do different things. And we can tell it what to do. And that doesn't mean that you're not smart. It just means that you have to do things in a way that allow your brain to access the parts of it that it needs.
Absolutely. So, I mean, if you look at the definition of dyslexia itself, it's a condition that's characterized by poor phonological awareness that cannot be explained by intelligence. And so, I mean, I would say that a lot of our older clients, especially, were undiagnosed for a huge period of time because of their intelligence. They were memorizers. And so they got by memorizing all of the words on the page and appearing like they were reading, when actually it was just a memorization thing. And so sometimes later, when the texts get more difficult, the words get longer, you're having more cognitive rigorous demand put on you at school, then it becomes more obvious that you actually don't have the skills that you should fundamentally. But it's really just going back and making sure that the brain can actually hear and respond to the language, and then you can do things that a neurotypical person would do. To that point, like if a person with dyslexia were to see the word cat, the first thing that happens is that the eyes take that information in and they kind of shoot it to the back of the brain in the occipital lobe where you process vision. And so if there's nothing back here that's processing language, the brain doesn't really know what to do with that. So that's where you start to see like, well, maybe I might reverse the way that looks, or I might add in some sounds, or I might forget some sounds, or sometimes it might land. And I may actually be able to trigger something that processes language, and it might seem like I've had a breakthrough. And then the next minute, I'm right back to doing the same things that I did before. And so again, it's that in combination with like, what am I actually hearing in a word? And so the relationship between these two areas of the brain is what you're looking to stimulate, what you're looking to change. And it absolutely can be changed in short order.
That's so crazy. That's so cool. I'm so excited and so enthralled. And I've already told my mom, I'm like, I found this really awesome program and I really want to get Callahan signed up. I want to get him. He's going to get ready to finish vision therapy. She said she thinks he'll be able to graduate that from the end of this year. And I think that when we're still seeing, because we're at a point now where in the vision therapy, he's made a ton of progress and it's phenomenal, but we're still seeing the flipping of B's and D's. We're still seeing sometimes where he wants to do the guessing and we're like, enough now that this shouldn't be happening. But at the same time, if we're still having some deficits in those different parts of the brain, he's going to still need something to help him bridge that gap even more. But he's excited because I know that he's already seen kind of his own potential and that he can do a lot of things that he before couldn't do. And so one of the things too that I feel like, when parents hear dyslexia in an IEP meeting or by a psychologist or anything along those lines, how can I say this? What would be something that if you are sitting in that chair with them, what is something that you would really want to try to convey to them at that time? Because obviously, as being a mother, all sorts of crazy things are going through your head. Like, what do I do now? Is this going to cost me a fortune? How is this, how does this all work? So what is something you would tell them that would be probably encouraging, hopefully for them to hear, I would imagine?
Absolutely. Well, so the first thing that I would tell them is that you have the capacity to change this outcome. And I think that's the most powerful conversation. And so we do have a lot of clients whose children are younger that choose not to even tell their child that they have that because they know that the condition is going to be so different once they're done with treatment that if that needs to become part of the conversation, then it can. But to your point, like I think sometimes you can get so wrapped around a label that you create an identity that is really disempowering instead of, creating this empowering belief system. And so there are certainly gifts, humongous gifts to having a brain has dyslexia because, whether it's divergent thinking or, some of the creativity that comes alongside of that. And so I think, just really minding the way that that's presented, but to know, I guess, in an inspirational way that you can absolutely do something about it. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there that kind of leads parents to believe that this is a diagnosis that's untreatable. Mhm.
I thought so because even the visual therapy place that might take my child, I explained to them. I said, how do we know that it's not dyslexia or it is what you're talking about? And they said dyslexia is they explained it as a developmental brain difference, and it is not like the way that they said it. It's not treatable, at least with vision therapy, but they kind of made it seem as though it's not something you can really work on. It's just impossible. And so I was like, okay, so we'll go this route first, but. Yeah. So tell me, I want to hear, and hopefully you can recall most of the details, but can you tell me, without actually breaching any confidentiality, like one of your favorite success stories to talk to people and tell people of?
Oh my goodness, there's so many. But,
I know.
We regularly cry on our Q&As because, it is an emotional experience. Like we had a mother last week and she just said, like, you have changed my life. I mean, we just had this very fixated view of what was going to be possible for her and to just see her grow into her own. But oh gosh, we had a client that was 8, was really struggling with behavior, was really struggling with attention. Like a lot of the things that were happening for her in a school setting were just like not going well, such that they had to pull her out of school and give her different instruction because it was going that poorly. And so, she got in and 6 weeks later, she's able to spell 100% of the time. And so like you talk to her mom now, like, what does it look like for her? How's she doing? Well, she's reading 45 minutes at a time. She's at the 87th percentile. She's writing on her own. Like she wants to pick up a notebook and start writing her little stories about whatever it is that she wants. And so it's that independence, it's the confidence. And I would say that has been the resounding comment from parents that's been like the biggest celebration is just the confidence that comes from like, I can actually do this. Mm-hmm. I don't have to go ask somebody because I don't know how to spell this, or I don't even feel like I want to pick up a book because I don't know what I'm doing. Like I would say over and over, we had a client share, like, my son went to bed with an entire bed full of books. Like the whole thing was just covered in books. And she said, it made me almost want to fall on the floor because he not only didn't read books, he refused like adamantly to even touch them. But once you feel like you can, it's not that the child doesn't want to learn. They do. And they don't want to be struggling. No child wants to be struggling. So once you start to open up that window of opportunity and possibility, it's been amazing to see and hear the stories of victory.
That's awesome. Have you also found that kids, once they've kind of bridged over to being able to learn, that their behavior also is changed too? Like I know.
Big time.
Wow.
Big time.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah. See, and I always wonder too, because I know that, so for me, one of the reasons why I had such a hard time getting my oldest son, actually, any sort of IEP or 504, or any sort of help at the time is they were like, well, he doesn't really have behavioral issues. And I was like, yeah, why is that? Why does that have to be such a deciding factor? So let me get this straight. He listens well and he will sit still and try to engage with the teacher and things along those lines and mind the rules so he can't get extra help because to you it seems as though he's not struggling, so I'm like, so what do I have to go tell him? Like, do I need to tell him to start putting graffiti on his desk, like, so that he can get the attention he needs? It's not okay. Now, granted, we're grateful that he's never been given that label, no matter how much I tried for him, because he has dreams now that doing anything along those lines, getting an IEP or a 504, something along those lines would actually deter the path he wants to take. But it's a matter too of, you have kids who, I feel like parents, especially with kids who have, something like dyslexia, a long time, like you were saying, oftentimes it goes right hand in hand with ADHD or autism or anything along those lines. And you have parents who are categorizing their children based on their children's behaviors like they would categorize an adult. So, you see people say all the time, oh, don't judge. But this is the first thing we do. We don't mean to do it, but it's one of the first things we do. So, if you meet another adult and based on their behavior, they seem, they are untimely, they're disorganized, they don't care what you think, they're rude or whatever, all those different things. As an adult, you're kind of going to go, yeah, I don't think I really get along with that person. And then so you have these kids who come into these situations and they are struggling to learn and they're struggling to figure out, why they can't learn. And their behavior mimics the stress that they're under, right? It mimics that cry out for help, well, I can't do it right, or I'm just stupid, or something's wrong with me. I remember I didn't get diagnosed with ADHD till I was almost 30. And I looked back and I thought, I spent so much of my time in school thinking that I was just lazy and there was just something wrong with me. And why couldn't I do it like the rest of my peers? If I was trying as hard as I was supposed to be trying, why couldn't I do it? And, to then find that out, I was like, wow. And my mom even said, she's like, I'm so sorry I didn't notice, because she had it herself. So I feel like that's one thing I really want parents to understand is that if they're acting out, if they're struggling, if they're doing anything along those lines, you can't judge a child's behavior the same way you would judge an adult behavior just based on how they come about or how they act. Because if their brain is not working with them, they're going to do everything they can just to pacify the situation, but also to get the attention from you that they seek. If they're not able to get the rewarded attention of good job, you did so good in school or whatever, but they do get the what's wrong with you? Why aren't you getting good grades? How come you can't pay attention in class kind of attention? They're going to continue that trajectory because of the fact that the reward system doesn't actually recognize the difference between, a parent giving them that kind of feedback and a parent giving them, better feedback. They're going to still try, but if they're not being given the tools that they need to be able to work with the brain they have, they're going to continue. And it's so frustrating to tell parents, like, I know that you're dealing with kids who, sometimes they can't control their own behavior, but, all you can do is control what you can control and try to help your child navigate their own brain. But it can be so difficult. So it's so exciting to hear that, though, that you said that, some of these kids come away and because they're learning so well, their ability to absorb information has just completely changed everything. Because it's not just that information in the classroom that they need to absorb. It's their parental discipline. It's the understanding of different things, the being able to continue to reason through, logic and emotions and all those different things to talk to somebody and actually understand what they're trying to tell you. That's huge. That's so big. So please tell us where my audience could find you. And then also if there's any other resources that, are freely available to them that they can find through your website, how would they get to those?
Absolutely. So the website is drrebeccatroy.com. And on there, you can get a link to it's a 45-minute webinar that's free to you, but it kind of goes through the 5 steps to help you to retrain your child's brain. And so it kind of gives you an overview of, not only what dyslexia is, but some of the most common issues and a primer to basically how we approach the condition and the treatment. And so from there, it will prompt you to be able to book a call. And so we offer a free breakthrough session to everybody that would want one. And so on that call, we just kind of dive in to see whether or not the experiences that you're having are a fit to what we do. So, based in entire integrity, like we want to make sure that you actually have the issues that we can treat. And then, not only that, but are you committed to showing up? So a big part of being successful in a program like ours is that you have the commitment to do the daily exercise. I mean, you can give the best possible strategies to anybody, but if you don't show up to do the work, you're not going to get the same result. And so we kind of go through all of those pieces. And then from there, we get you enrolled in the program, and you can start, like I said, as little as 48 hours later. And then 12 weeks later, you are completely living a different reality. So
That is
we're all about
awesome.
transformation.
That is just so, so great. And I'm so excited. And so I'm going to link to everything that Dr. Troy talked about in the podcast. You will find that in the podcast show note. And definitely check out her programs. She does actually have other programs too that build on the first program for retraining the dyslexic brain and really help your child to achieve the most that you know as a parent that they are totally capable of, but they just need to be given the right resources. So I'm super excited for that. I cannot wait. If this is something that you feel inclined to look at, definitely take a look. And you can also find Dr. Troy on her Facebook, her Instagram. She also has a YouTube channel. And then Dr. Troy, is your Facebook group, is that just for parents that are enrolled in the program?
No, so we actually have two Facebook groups. We have a Facebook group that is for our clients exclusively, that community that we were talking about where everybody's celebrating. But we have a Dyslexia Solutions Inner Circle, which is available to anybody. And what's awesome is that we do celebrate clients quite frequently on there. So you can see like, okay, here's client X, they are this old, this is what they look like before treatment. And then we celebrate the heck out of them and what they did, 12 weeks later. So that can be a very inspirational place to live if you're looking for another group to join on Facebook.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find too that parents of neurodivergent kids, we really have to stay together just because of the fact that it's so different for us. You have a lot of parents who want to quickly say, oh, well, that child's just, the parent just doesn't know what they're doing. And that's not the case. So yes, I will link also to Dr. Troy's Facebook group so that you can find her free Facebook group. And then if you do enroll in her program, I'm sure she'll direct you to the Facebook group for the parents that are enrolled. So thank you so much again for coming on,
Absolutely.
Dr. Troy. I'm so grateful for you. And we will be talking to you really soon.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
That is going to wrap up this episode of an ADD Woman podcast. And if any of the things I just said are of interest to you, love to hear what you think. And I'll be talking to you guys soon.